I didn't say yes. I ran. The organ never finished its triumphant swell. It broke beneath the scrape of my heels and the gasp that tore the aisle in half. Lace clawed at my knees as I gathered the skirt and bolted, the veil yanking like a net, pins biting my scalp. White is supposed to mean purity. On my skin, it felt like a sentence. The cathedral doors hit the light, and the city swallowed me whole. Palermo, hot, noisy, merciless, shimmered beyond the steps. Confetti stuck to my lips like grit. Somewhere my mother's voice was still arranging my future, syllable by syllable, but the bells drowned her out, ringing as if to alert the hunters. The bride has fled. I kicked off the shoes. The stone burned my soles. The pain steadied me. Down the steps, into the street, a river of scooters, curses, vendors shouting about figs and fish. People stared at the dress. They always stare at white. No one reached for me. No one saved me. I threaded through bodies, stitched myself into the crowd, and prayed I wouldn't come undone. Matteo's name pulsed under my tongue like a secret. He'd said, "Don't look back. I'll find you near the fountain." His hands had been warm, the way sunlight warms a window. He smelled like machine oil and coffee. Nothing royal, nothing gilded. Just life. We were supposed to leave today. The day I was meant to be offered like a wine poured for men older than my memories. A honk snapped the air. A black sedan idled against the curb, windows tinted to midnight. My ribs cinched. I kept walking, steady, as if the city itself could hide me by pretending I was part of it. A boy ran past with a kite. It licked my veil and dragged it sideways. I yanked the fabric free and kept moving, into an alley where laundry floated like flags of surrender. I was 23 and I had been taught to arrange flowers that matched bloodlines, to smile on command, to keep my voice low, my skirt long, my eyes lower. "You will be a good wife to the capo," my mother said, powdering my face until it didn't belong to me. Power protects. Power also cages. I had learned that quietly, in rooms where doors clicked like weapons. Another sedan. Another mirror catching my face like a hook. I ducked into a narrow passage that smelled of frying anchovies and iron. My dress snagged on a nail. The rip sounded obscene. Somewhere far behind, a cluster of men shouted. Ceremony thrown into chaos, suits colliding, a promise unraveling. My name would be a curse now. Isabella, the bride who ran. I reached the piazza with the broken fountain and climbed its rim. The water was low, green around the edges, glittering with coins and lost wishes. A wedding veil reflected back, shredded. I tore it off, hands shaking, and stuffed it under a bench. Sweat cut a path down my spine. I scanned faces, tourists, a nun, 2 boys kicking a ball, no Matteo. A tremor seized my mouth. He'll come. He has to. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. "Do you think the city can hide you?" My throat tightened. I killed the screen and looked up at the balconies. On the 3rd floor, a figure leaned from the shade, a cigarette ember winking like an eye. Just a man. Just a shadow. My pulse refused the word just. I slid off the fountain and moved again, head down. A taxi slowed. The driver glanced at me, at the dress, at the tear in the hem. His eyebrows asked 100 questions I couldn't answer. "Porto," I said, voice raw. "Per favore." He hesitated, then unlocked the door. The seat stuck to the backs of my legs. As we pulled into traffic, I watched the piazza shrink, and with it the last fragment of a life I'd never chosen. "Big day?" the driver asked, a cruel joke without knowing. "Wrong church," I said. He laughed softly, then stopped, hearing whatever cracked underneath my words. The city slid by in feverish strips, saints on cracked stucco, meat hanging like tongues, the sea beyond everything, glittering as if the horizon were a promise it could keep. Matteo and I would cross it. We had a plan. A ferry south, a bus to anywhere, new names, a tiny apartment with peeling paint and a bed that squeaked because we earned it. A motorcycle cut in front of us, a glare of chrome and noise. The rider looked back once, then vanished. My heart leapt like a dog to a whistle. Not Matteo. Not yet. We hit a red light. On the corner, a florist poured buckets of water over stems. The scent of roses rose damp and heavy, the same roses that had swallowed the altar. I remembered Lorenzo's name pressed into the invitations like a bruise. I had never kissed him. I had barely spoken to him since childhood. He had refused me once when I was an infant promise in a white bonnet, and men remembered refusals like debts. The light turned. We rolled forward. The port cranes tilted against the sky like a row of iron crosses. "Almost," I whispered, and felt the word move through me like morphine. My phone again. Unknown number. "Wedding's over. You forgot your husband." My hands went numb. I typed with thumbs that didn't feel like mine. Wrong number. Send. My reflection in the glass looked calm, a doll with smoke-colored eyes. Inside me, doors slammed. Another message. You looked beautiful running. I prefer you without the veil. The taxi's radio hiccuped static. I sank lower, as if the seat could fold over me and make me unrecognizable. Faster, I said. The driver didn't ask why. Money makes obedience easy. Blood makes it mandatory. We turned onto the road that skims the sea. Waves complicated themselves against the rocks. The port opened its jaw. We passed a parking lot scattered with trucks and men in neon vests. The ferry loomed, white and patient. I tasted salt. I tasted freedom like the rind of a lemon. Bitter, shocking, alive. Here? The driver asked. Here. I threw bills at the seat and shoved the door open. Air struck me hard and honest. I ran again, dress flaring, hair coming loose past the pins. No one grabs a bride at a port in daylight, I told myself. Not in front of witnesses. Not where gulls watch like judges. A gull screamed. Somewhere, far away, a whistle blew. My phone chimed a final time. I didn't want to look. I looked. A photo waited, me, on the fountain rim, eyes hunting the street, the tear in my hem like a wound, the veil under the bench. The angle was high, precise, intimate. I see you, it said without words. I lifted my gaze to the ferry ramp and then higher, to the roof of the terminal where heat bent the air. People moved up there. Maintenance, tourists, shadows. One shape didn't move at all. It stood at the edge as if the city were a chessboard, and I a piece he had already claimed. The message beneath the photo read, "Run, Bella. I like the chase."
I like weddings for their logistics. So many moving parts. Schedules, mouths to feed, doors to lock. It's easy to hide a net in lace when everyone is looking at flowers. She ran on the minute I calculate. The organ cracked, the aisle split open, and Bella, became motion. I let the doors breathe. I let the city take her, because the city belongs to me. From the back pew, I didn't chase. I walked. Outside, the heat flexed over the stone, and confetti hurled itself at the wind like cheap blessings. One car idled at the curb, another drifted behind, a third at the far end of the block. Men in black ties became tourists if someone looked too long. My men know how to look harmless. They are not. She kicked off her shoes. Blood found the pores of the street, a delicate map only I was close enough to. The urge to kneel and lift her, to shield her feet with my hands, flared so violently I tasted iron. Not yet. Not here. Via Makeda, I told my driver, voice even. Don't crowd her. He nodded. He doesn't speak unless I want him to. Power is mostly silence arranged into obedience. Bella threaded the crowd in a torn cloud of white. Palermo pressed against her, the city a chorus of cellars and smoke, the sea bright at the edge like a lie everyone agrees to love. I watched from one lane over, tinted glass, pulse patient. She slid into an alley lined with damp laundry. A sleeve brushed her cheek. She kept going. Brave thing. Stubborn. I sent the first message. Do you think the city can hide you? The number would be a ghost. She killed the screen. Of course she did. She has a spine. My mouth ached into a smile I don't wear in public. From a rooftop near the piazza, Corvo, my best set of eyes, fed me angled. The fountain. Her reflection, ragged veil like a drowned bird. She hid the veil beneath a bench. Smart, but not invisible. I could have taken her, a hand to her throat, a car door, the soft click of inevitability. Instead, I watched the way fear and resolve warred inside her shoulders. I prefer to meet a person's choices before I own. Another text. Wedding's over. You forgot your husband. I pictured the bite of the words in her mouth, the way she'd hold herself smaller against them. She's been taught to be perfection is just a mirror polished by other people's hands until you can't see your face anymore. I want the face. The one beneath. A taxi lifted her from the pavement. We slid in behind, 3 cars back. The sea unspooled to our right, a bruised blue ribbon. The cranes were iron saints on the horizon. I could taste diesel and salt, hear gulls practicing. My father used to bring me here to count ships and names. Power is inventory, he'd say. Know what comes in, know what leaves. I know what leaves. I do not allow this one. She turned her head once, profile clean as scripture, hair slipping its pins. A pulse beat at her throat, frantic and alive. I texted, you looked beautiful running. I prefer you without the veil. It wasn't cruelty, it was truth. She is most herself when she's disobedient. Hold distance, I said to the driver. He eased off the gas. I could feel my men breathe through the radio, a flock held tight in the hand. And clear the secondary road, I added. 2 vans peeled off, closing a lane she might have used. Not enough to spook her, just enough to deny her the illusion of choice without her noticing. Mateo. The name has been an insect in my ear for months, a small, constant wing. He smells like machine oil and sweet coffee. He believes in doors without locks, and futures without debt. I don't hate him. I hate that the world made her think such futures exist for women born to families like ours. I did once reject her. A lace-wrapped bundle brought to a boy already drowning in an older boy's mistakes. I saw a life in miniature and knew I would destroy it if I touched it then. Refused. They called it cruelty. It was cowardice, maybe, or a promise postponed, until we could both survive it. The taxi arrowed toward the port. The ferry's white flank rose ahead, patient as a god. She paid, spilled into daylight, ran. The gulls gave the moment its soundtrack. Corvo's camera clicked from above. The fountain, the veil, the line of her jaw as she hunted the horizon, and found it hunting back. He sent the photo. I sent the last message. Run, Bella. I like the chase, because I do. Not the cruelty of it, though I am capable. The truth of it. The way a person's choices strip the theater from them and leave only bone and... She ran to the sea. Good. Let her taste the air. Let her lungs fill with salt and her eyes with light. Let her believe in escape with her whole body. Tonight I will let her find him. I will stand in a doorway where the shadows draw themselves around my shoulders, and I will watch his hands on her. Gentle, shaking, hopeful. The stage requires all its actors. The blade requires a breath before it falls, even when it won't fall at all. I won't take his life, not truly. There are other ways to remove a piece from the board. Far away is a kind of death that leaves the heart free to choose its grave. The driver glanced at me in the mirror. He didn't hold the look. No one does for long. Home after this, signore? Yes, I said, and watched my bride become a white flame against the steel ramp of the ferry. I'm bringing her home.
The port smelled of diesel and salt, a mix sharp enough to sting my lungs. Seagulls wheeled overhead like impatient witnesses, their cries shredding what was left of my nerves. I held the torn skirt against my thighs and forced myself to keep moving, weaving between crates and passengers dragging suitcases, each of them too wrapped in their own lives to notice a runaway bride. I kept scanning, frantic, until I saw him. Mateo. He stood near the edge of the ferry terminal, backlit by the sun, hair messy from the wind, a backpack slung over one shoulder. When his eyes found me, his whole face cracked open into relief, the kind of relief that hurts because it means you've been holding your breath too long. Bella! My name was no longer a curse in his mouth. It was a rescue. I stumbled forward, the hem of my dress catching on concrete, and then his arms were around me, solid, familiar. He smelled of cheap soap and cigarettes, nothing polished or expensive, just alive. My body shook against him, sobs breaking loose without permission. He kept whispering, I've got you, like a prayer he didn't dare stop saying. You came, I whispered against his shirt, words muffled by fabric. Of course I did. You think I'd let you do this alone? His hands cradled my face, warm thumbs brushing tears away as if he could erase the last hour, the last lifetime. We have to hurry. The ferry leaves in 20 minutes. After that, it's just us. No vows, no chains. No vows, no chains. The words lit something in me, fragile and bright, a dangerous hope. I glanced around, pulse spiking. The street beyond the port was too still. A black car lingered at the curb, engine purring, windows dark. My skin prickled. Mateo didn't notice. He never notices shadows. That's what I love about him, and what terrifies me. Do you have the tickets? I asked, clutching his wrist. Here. He pulled 2 slips of paper from his pocket, edges damp with sweat. They looked ordinary. Freedom always looks ordinary until you reach for it. New names? He grinned. Boyish. Reckless. Mr. and Mrs. Romano. You like the sound of that? My chest tightened. Romano. A name without blood debts, without mafiosi breathing down our necks. A name that meant a door we chose, not one forced open by men older than my bones. I nodded, swallowing the ache in my throat. Mateo, are you sure? If they find us... He pressed a finger to my lips. They won't. We'll be gone before anyone notices. Once we're across, we'll disappear. Trust me. Trust me. I wanted to. I needed to. His optimism was a shield, thin but blinding. We moved toward the boarding ramp. The ferry's engines hummed like a beast awakening, ready to carry us somewhere nameless. I clutched Mateo's hand so hard he winced, but he didn't let go. For the first time in my life, I was choosing. Not my mother, not the families, not the capo who thought I was his by birthright. Me, Bella, the girl who ran. The loudspeaker crackled, announcing departure in clipped Italian. Passengers shuffled forward. The ramp creaked under the weight of suitcases and tired feet. Every step we took was a rebellion, every breath a theft from the life designed for me. Halfway up, Matteo leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. We made it. I almost believed him. Almost. Then I felt it, like ice crawling up my spine, the sensation of being watched, hunted. I turned, heart pounding. On the far side of the street, past the cars and the gulls, stood a man in the shadow of the terminal. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. His outline was sharp as a blade, still as carved stone. Even at this distance, I knew. Lorenzo. The world tilted. Matteo tugged my hand, urging me forward, blind to the weight of the stair pinning me in place. We're safe, he whispered. But I couldn't breathe, because safety doesn't stand in shadows with eyes like fire. And I knew then, the chase wasn't over. It was only beginning.
Ports are easy to bend. Money loosens rules. Fear erases witnesses. By the time her heel touched the ferry ramp, my people had already made the security cameras blink, forget. A drill siren trilled. Maintenance issue, please clear the boarding area. And the crowd thinned the way water retreats from a blade. Passengers grumbled, shuffled backward. A corridor opened like a throat. I stepped into it. Bella froze halfway up the ramp, fingers locked around his wrist. Matteo, grease under his nails, a backpack with a frayed strap. Hope rushing through him so fast it made him clumsy. He put himself between us without thinking, as if his body could be a wall where architecture and generations had failed. End of the line, I said, calm enough to be mistaken for kindness. He swallowed, eyes cutting for an exit that didn't exist. She doesn't belong to you. Everyone belongs to someone, I said. Some of us are honest about it. Bella's breath hitched, small, sharp, a wounded bird inside her throat. Her dress was torn at the hem, salt dusting her calves. Fear made her beautiful, not because it made her weak, but because it stripped every lie from her face. She looked at me like a question she hated needing answered. Come here, Bella. I didn't raise my voice. I never have to. She didn't move. Matteo tightened his grip on her hand. Brave, foolish, human. He tried to walk her backward, edging toward a side gate that had already been locked 5 seconds earlier. Corvo's silhouette hung high on the terminal, a black punctuation. My men were shadows behind crates and stacks of cargo, pretending to be nothing at all. Matteo found his voice. You'll have to shoot me. I expected to, I said. He flinched. She did too. Words can be the cleanest bullets. On your knees, I told him. He didn't kneel. He lifted his chin and tried to make himself taller than he. There are moments a man decides the shape of his legend. He chose to be a height he couldn't keep. I stepped forward and took Bella's wrist gently as I pried her hand. Her skin burned my palm. The shock in her eyes struck me harder than any fist I've taken. Don't touch her, he snarled, lunging. 2 steps, quick. Then my bodyguard's forearm crossed his chest and folded him down. The sound of his knees hitting concrete ricocheted off metal. Not a crack. A promise. A lesson, I said, more to the air than to him. About debts. He looked up at me, mouth bloody where he'd bit his lip. She chose me. She chose to run, I said. Not the same thing. Bella tore at my... I let her tear. I wanted her to try. She hit my shoulder with a closed fist. A desperate, gorgeous mistake. I took it. The flare went through me like heat through paper. For a second I nearly burned in place. Look at me, I told her. She refused. So I tilted her chin with 2 fingers. And her eyes, the ash and smoke of them, met mine. Please, she said, and the word graffitied my spine with fire. Don't. I've heard men beg. I've heard kings weep. I've heard bullets. Her please was the first thing in years that made the world hesitate. Hold her, I said, because hesitation is death. My man took her arms. She fought like a storm bottled too long. I drew the gun. Mate black. Unremarkable the way a scalpel is unremarkable until it opens a body. Matteo stared at it, then at me, and then past me at the slice of sea that would never be his. He set his jaw. I admired him for that. I admire people who tell the truth when pain makes lying easy. This is mine. I do not enjoy cruelty for itself. I enjoy design. I enjoy the exquisite geometry of consequences snapping into place. I stepped close enough to smell his fear. Salt, smoke, something like copper wire over. You were always going to lose, I said quietly, but not because you're small, because you don't understand the game. He spat at my shoes, brave to the end. The bodyguard pressed his shoulders down. I lifted the gun, and in the corner of my vision Bella's face broke into something raw and unrepeatable. The shot went off like punctuation at the end of a prayer. Blood leapt. He jerked backward and collapsed, cheek hitting concrete. The sound Bella made had no language. She lunged, the arms holding her tightened. I didn't look at her, not immediately. I looked at him. I watched breath flee his mouth and vanish into the heat. Silence fell in a ring around us, thick as velvet. Somewhere far away, a gull laughed, indifferent. I crouched beside his body, eyes glassing. skin whitening, a stain blooming wide beneath his shoulder. The world always loves red on white. It's a vulgar romance. Clean, I said to no one in particular. Movement answered me. Professional, precise. A tarp, gloves. A van's rear door yawning. The kind of choreography that keeps cities believing in accidents. I stood and finally looked at Bella. She tore free one arm and struck me again. Nails finding skin this time. Pain etched a line across my cheek. Heat gathered there like a brand. I let it mark me. Monster, she whispered, hoarse. You killed him. I reached for her face. She recoiled, but there is a gravity between us that refuses denial. I touched the corner of her mouth with my thumb, wiped away a taste of salt that wasn't mine. I ended a mistake, I said, voice low enough to be confusion if she needed it to be. And I kept what belongs to me. Her eyes burned. I don't belong to you. Not yet, I said. Behind me the van door thudded shut. The smear of blood on the concrete looked like a map of an unfamiliar country, one she would never visit. The siren died. The public returned at the edges, curious noise approaching like tide. I holstered the gun and nodded to my men. Home, I said. Bella's legs shook as they guided her forward. She kept her head twisted toward the van as if a last look could force the world to revise itself. It didn't. As we passed the ferry, a breeze came off the water and lifted the torn edge of her dress so lightly it felt obscene. I stepped closer, not to shield her from the wind, but from everything else. Possession isn't a chain, it's a radius, and she had just entered mine.
The walls of the mansion swallowed sound. They swallowed me. I had screamed until my throat broke raw on the drive back, fists slamming against the leather seat, the blur of the city vanishing past the window as if the world had conspired to look away. But by the time the gates opened, iron fangs biting sky, and the car rolled onto the graveled path, my voice was gone. What remained was silence, heavy, deliberate, obscene. The mansion stood like a cathedral abandoned by God. Marble steps rose toward doors that could have belonged to a palace. Chandeliers glowed behind glass, cold fire instead of warmth. It wasn't a home. It was a mausoleum built for the living. They pulled me from the car. My knees nearly buckled against the stone. I kept my eyes down because if I looked up, I'd see him. And if I saw him, I'd break into pieces sharp enough to cut myself. Mateo. The echo of his body hitting concrete replayed behind my eyelids, over and over, until I thought I'd go blind. The gunshot was still ringing in my chest. Every breath tasted of blood that wasn't mine. They guided me inside, hands on my arms like I was porcelain and shackles at once. A corridor stretched ahead, ceilings too high, paintings too dark. The air smelled of polish and smoke. Somewhere deep, a grandfather clock ticked, indifferent to death, indifferent to me. They left me in a room at the end. Double doors, carved roses twisting into thorns. The lock clicked behind me. It was beautiful. Too beautiful. The bed was vast, sheets white as shrouds. Velvet curtains draped the windows, strangling daylight. A vanity gleamed with untouched perfume bottles. All of it perfect, like a dollhouse for a doll that doesn't breathe. I tore at the veil still clinging to my hair and flung it across the floor. It landed in a heap like a molted skin. The mirror caught my face, streaked with salt and smeared lipstick. I didn't recognize the girl staring back. Not his, I whispered, just to hear it out loud. My voice cracked. Not his. But the silence ate the words, left me with nothing but the tremor of my own breath. I staggered to the window and pulled at the heavy curtains. Beyond the glass, gardens stretched, manicured into obedience. A hedge wall rose high, too high, wrapping the mansion like a collar. At the farthest edge, guards patrolled, shadows with rifles. Prison. Even the roses were imprisoned, cut into shapes they hadn't chosen. My stomach turned. I pressed a hand against the glass until it cooled my fevered skin. Somewhere in that city, Mateo's body was being buried in shadows, erased from the world. And here I was, alive, breathing, because the man who killed him wanted me to be. I collapsed onto the edge of the bed. My fists twisted the sheets until they wrinkled into storms. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. Grief had frozen into something harder, sharper. The door opened. I snapped my head up, breath caught. Lorenzo stepped inside, alone, his suit immaculate despite the blood I had seen bloom across his hands. He carried no weapon now. He didn't need one. His presence was the weapon. He closed the door quietly, as if politeness could disguise the lock clicking again. His eyes found me where I sat, small and trembling against the white bed. I wanted to spit at him, to scream, claw, tear at his face until my nails broke. But my body betrayed me. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. He crossed the room slowly, measured, as if approaching a wild thing he didn't want to startle. The silence followed him like a cloak. When he stopped, he was close enough that I could feel the heat rolling off him, the air bending to make room for him. "You'll stay here tonight," he said. His voice was even, deep, threaded with steel. "No one will touch you. No one will harm you. This room is yours." My laugh broke sharp, ugly. "Mine? You mean my cage?" His mouth curved. Not a smile, something darker. "Cages protect what is precious." I surged to my feet, fury cutting through grief. "You killed him! You killed the only person who ever gave me a choice!" My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated myself for the sound. For a flicker of a moment, something moved in his gaze. Not regret, not quite, but a shadow of something human. Then it was gone, swallowed by the cold mask he wore. "You'll understand in time," he said. I shook my head, trembling. "I'll never forgive you." He stepped closer, so close the distance felt dangerous. His hand lifted, slow, deliberate, and for a second I thought he would touch me. My skin braced, breath frozen. But his fingers only brushed the torn strap of my dress, fixing it back into place like he was correcting a detail in a painting. Then he leaned closer, his voice low, intimate, unshakable. "Forgiveness is irrelevant. You are mine, Bella. You can hate me, you can fight me, but you will stay. And one day you'll understand what it means to be mine." My heart hammered so loud it drowned the clock, the silence, everything. He turned and left, the door locking again behind him. I stood there shaking, hatred burning, grief smoldering, and somewhere deep inside, where I didn't want to admit it, an ember of something far more dangerous began to glow.
I left her outside the door because a lock is kinder than a crowd. In my office, the windows opened onto gardens groomed within an inch of honesty. Lamps burned low. The room smelled like leather and smoke and the faint ghost of her. Salt and roses. Grief turned into weather. I set my jacket on the chair and rolled my sleeve. There was a crescent of her nail on my cheek, a red parenthesis coup to fact. I touched it and didn't wipe it away. Some truths should sting. "Water," I told the butler, "and broth for the bride. Warm, no wine." He nodded, disappearing with the soundless efficiency that keeps kings alive, and put 2 women on the corridor outside her room. No men. Anyone who breathes wrong near that door forgets how. He swallowed. "Si, signore. Power is not volume. It's the space between words where people learn to obey." On the desk, a line of photographs in silver frames, my father with a cigarette and a stare like sharpened weather, my mother before she decided silence was armor, a harbor dusk where cranes bent like iron saints. I slid the drawer open and took out the little white bonnet someone once tried to hand me with a future attached. I was 11. Men in dark suits crowded the old dining room, lies sweating off their foreheads with the wine. A woman placed a swaddled infant in my arms and said, "Promessa, promise." She smelled like milk and sleep and a world I didn't know how to touch without breaking. I held her for 1 second, then another, then felt my wrists turn to glass under the weight of everyone's expectation. "No," I said, and the men laughed until they didn't. That was the first refusal I allowed myself. They called it cruelty. It was a boy choking on a room full of futures he didn't earn. I closed my hand around the bonnet and the fabric had yellowed, soft as regret. The house ticked. Somewhere 2 floors up, the floorboards might remember the pressure of her feet pacing, the tempo of a heart that had stamped my name into its fear. I didn't kill not the way she believes. A stage requires blood for the back row. I gave them a convincing scene. A shoulder will bleed like tragedy. A van will erase like magic. The world will nod and say, of course. It's not mercy. It's architecture. I moved a piece off the board and mailed him to the farthest edge of it, where his optimism can't tempt her into drowning. One day I will tell her. Not now. Truth given too early is just a different cage. Corvo knocked. 2 sharp taps, and slid inside. Porto is clean. No witnesses that matter. The boy is en route. Good. I poured water. Watched the glass fog. The families? DeSantis sniffing. Brunetti whining about the ceremony. Your mother sent a rosary and a warning. What warning? She says you don't win wars by setting yourself on fire. I smiled without humor. Sometimes you. He eyed the scratch across my cheek. The blood dried at the edge of my cuff. She landed a mark, he said, almost amused. I let her. It wasn't entirely true. I simply didn't move. There are blows you pocket because you deserve them. Double the perimeter. I don't want rifles visible from her window. Roses, not bars. Roses have thorns. Exactly. Alone again, I sat and let the memories open their teeth. I saw her as a child from across rooms I refused to enter. Bright as a match, tucked into corners by women who thought compliance was a prayer. I kept my distance, quarantined from her life by the math of years and by the fear that anything I touched would calcify into obligation. When she turned 21, The families began to nudge the old promise back onto the. I watched her move through a party in a blue dress and knew the table had become a target. She laughed with her head tilted toward the ceiling, as if searching for air no one had offered. Not desire, hunger. Not for me, for a door. I built her a door. It looks like a cage from the wrong side. On the wall hangs my father's map of Palermo, the streets drawn like veins under glass. He used to tap the port with his finger. Inventory, he'd say. Know what comes in, know what. I tapped the map where her bedroom sits in the geometry of the house. Far wing, west-facing windows, gardens below. Not an exit, a vantage. A tray arrived, porcelain bowl, steam unwinding like a patient animal. I took it myself. The guards straightened outside her door. I watched their eyes find the floor. Good. The lock turned with the softest click. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands in her lap, posture. The room held its breath around her. She had scrubbed her face. The ruin of lipstick was gone, leaving the precise lines of a mouth built for defiance. When she looked at me, there was an ocean in and a storm. I brought you broth, I said. I'm not hungry. You are. I'd rather starve. You won't. I set the bowl on the nightstand. Not here. Her gaze slid to the window where the curtains met like pressed lips. How many guns between me and the street? Enough. I reached for the strap of her dress, intact now, and stopped my hand inches short, the memory of fixing it earlier a pulse under my skin. You're safe. She laughed once, a sound with edges. From whom? From you. Especially from me. The words surprised both of us. I let them stand. No one touches you. No one decides your breaths but you. I angled my head. Except this. You stay. Her chin lifted. Because you say so. Because you're not ready to leave. I stepped back before the gravity between us became confession. Eat. Sleep. The house will stop feeling like a stranger when it learns your. I reached the door and paused. Bella, I said, not turning. When you hit me, you told the truth. What truth? That you're alive. I opened the door. Keep being that. In the corridor, the air tasted different. I allowed myself one touch to the scratch on my cheek, one breath that trembled before it steadied. Then I folded the tremor into steel and went back to the map, to the phone calls, to the war waiting outside the roses, carrying with me the knowledge that somewhere in the house a storm had chosen to keep.
The mansion hated me. I could feel it in the way the corridors swallowed my footsteps, the way the walls leaned in, listening. Days blurred, if they were days at all. The windows lied about time, curtains drawn, light filtered until I couldn't tell dawn from dusk. Meals arrived like clockwork, untouched porcelain. Guards hovered like shadows pretending to be men. I slept little, dreamed too much, and I planned. It was the only thing keeping me upright. Every time I pressed my ear to the door, I memorized the routine. A shift change every 4 hours, footsteps that echoed differently depending on which side of the hallway they patrolled. When the tray came, I watched the key turn, counted the seconds until it clicked again. I kept notes in my mind, like beads on a rosary. One mistake, one gap, was all I needed. Matteo's face burned behind my eyes, the way he fell, the sound that broke from me as if my ribs had shattered open. My grief sharpened into resolve. If Lorenzo thought I would fold into obedience, he didn't know me. The chance came on the third night. The guards outside had grown careless, their voices drifting through the wood, low laughter, a muttered complaint. I slipped from the bed, barefoot, heartbeat ricocheting through my chest. The window was too high to climb. The door was my only prayer. I waited. The tray arrived. The lock clicked. The door opened. A woman stepped inside with a bowl of broth. She avoided my gaze, eyes fixed on the carpet. When she set the tray down, I moved. Quick, desperate. My hand clamped over her mouth, the other shoving her toward the wall. She gasped against my palm, the tray crashing to the floor. Porcelain shattered, broth steaming across the rug like blood. I don't want to hurt you, I whispered, my voice breaking with its own urgency. I just need the key, please. Her eyes flicked to mine, frightened, wide, and then to the door. The guard's voice. Everything all right? I pressed harder. Say yes. She trembled, lips parting under my hand. See, she stammered. Silence, then footsteps receding. I released her slowly. She didn't scream. Instead, she lifted a shaking hand, fingers curling around the key at her belt. For a heartbeat, I thought she would give it to me. Pity shone in her eyes, pity that cut deeper than cruelty. Then she shook her head. You can't, she whispered. He'll find you. Always. I lunged anyway, fingers brushing metal before she yanked it back. The door burst open. 2 guards stormed in, rifles slung across their chests. I froze, chest heaving. The woman slipped from my grasp, retreating behind them. They didn't touch me. They didn't need to. Their eyes carried the weight of chains. And then, his shadow. Lorenzo filled the doorway, suit immaculate, expression unreadable. His gaze dropped to the broken porcelain, then lifted to me. My lungs tightened, ready for fury, for punishment. But he only stepped inside, silent, his presence cutting the air into ribbons. The guards waited. "Leave us," he said. The door shut behind them. The silence was unbearable. My chest heaved with the remnants of hope turned ash. His eyes locked onto mine, steady, relentless. "You think I don't expect this?" His voice was quiet, almost tender. "I built this house for war, Bella. Against enemies outside, against storms inside." I shook, fury biting at my tongue. "I will never stop trying. Do you hear me? Never." Something shifted in his gaze. Amusement, maybe. Or admiration. "Good," he murmured. "I'd hate to cage a corpse." He stepped closer, stopping just short of touch. I could feel the heat of him, smell the faint smoke on his skin. His eyes burned with something I couldn't name. "One day," he said softly, "you'll run again, and I'll let you. Because I like to watch you choose me, even when you don't know you are." I wanted to spit at him, to scream until the walls cracked. Instead, I stood trembling, my hands curled into fists, the shattered porcelain glinting at my feet like the bones of my freedom. He left as quietly as he had come. The lock clicked again, sealing me in, but the fire inside me hadn't died. It had only found more oxygen.
They told me she tried to take the key. They told me she held her hand over the maid's mouth, eyes sharp as glass, desperation shaking her bones. I didn't need the report. I'd seen it in her gaze when I stepped into that room. The wildness, the hunger for a door. I let the night pass before I went back. Rage is a weapon. Use it too soon, and it dulls. Better to let it sharpen on silence. The corridor smelled of polish and roses. 2 guards stiffened as I approached her door, rifles tight in their hands. They feared her more than me, though they'd never admit it. I dismissed them with a glance. The lock clicked. Inside, she was standing at the window, curtains parted, her silhouette carved in moonlight, dress hanging loose on her shoulders like a battle flag. She didn't turn when defiance is an art she practices even in stillness. "Are you proud of yourself?" I asked, voice low. "Proud?" Her laugh was brittle, dangerous. "For failing? No. But for trying? Yes." I closed the door, leaning against it. The air between us felt alive, charged, thick with her fury. "You think freedom waits out there? You think the city, the sea, any of it belongs to you?" She spun then, eyes blazing. "Better to drown in the sea than rot in your gilded prison." The words struck deeper than I wanted. A shadow of my father's voice hissed in my skull. "Control what you own, or watch it be used against you." I moved toward her slowly. She didn't back away, not this time. She stood her ground, trembling but unbroken. The closer I came, the more I felt it, the tension snapping like electricity between us. I stopped a breath away. Her chest rose and fell too fast. I could see the pulse in her throat, rapid, alive. I wanted to press my mouth to it, bite it, taste her defiance until it turned into something else. Instead, I spoke. "Do you know what would happen if you had escaped tonight?" Her jaw clenched. "I don't care." "You should." My voice dropped, velvet wrapping around steel. "The city would have torn you apart. My enemies would have carved you into pieces just to prove they could. Mateo's death would have been a kindness compared to what you'd face." Her eyes flinched, just barely, but she didn't look away. "Brave girl. Brave enough to hate me. Brave enough to tempt me." "You're a liar," she whispered. "Every word from you is a chain." I stepped closer until our breaths tangled, until the night air between us turned fevered. My hand rose, hovering near her cheek, not touching. She stiffened, but didn't move. "Chains can hold," I murmured, "but they can also protect. And you," my gaze locked on hers, unyielding, "you are safest in mine." Her lips parted, not with surrender, but with rage. "You don't get to decide that. You don't get to decide me." That cut deeper than any blade. My fingers curled, aching to grip her jaw, to force her to see the truth I couldn't even admit to myself. But I stopped. Touching her now would not be possession. It would be confession. I lowered my hand, slowly. "You'll keep testing me," I said. "You'll keep trying to run. And every time I'll catch you." My voice hardened. "Because this is not a game, Bella. This is survival. And survival means you stay with me." Her eyes shimmered. Not tears. Not yet. But the fire in them was undeniable. "I hate you," she whispered. The words landed like a kiss. Sharp, searing, unforgettable. I leaned in, close enough that my lips nearly brushed her ear. "Good," I said softly. "Hate me with everything you have. Hate keeps you alive. Hate keeps you mine." And then I left her standing there, shaking, her hatred burning so bright I could feel it even after the lock sealed between us. Hatred is only a step from desire, and I could wait.
Hate keeps you alive. His words rotted in my skull, an echo I couldn't silence. He wanted me to hate him, wanted me to feed the very obsession that chained me here. But hate is fire, and fire doesn't always burn the way you expect. Sometimes it lights paths you shouldn't see. The next morning, the maid left a dress folded at the foot of my bed. Silk, black, the kind of thing designed to cling. I touched it with trembling fingers. It felt like surrender. It felt like a weapon. I dressed. When the door opened for the breakfast tray, I walked out before they could stop me. The guards stiffened, hands twitching toward their rifles. But I smiled. A sharp, deliberate thing. "Tell him," I said. "If he wants me to eat, he can invite me to his table." They hesitated, exchanged glances. No one denied Lorenzo anything, not even me. Minutes later, I was escorted down the marble corridors to a dining room that smelled of polished wood and power. He was already there. Black suit, no tie, coffee steaming at his elbow. He looked up as I entered, and for a heartbeat his composure cracked, the faintest flicker in his gaze. "Good. You dressed for me," he said. "No," I replied, sliding into the chair opposite him. "I dressed for myself." The silence stretched, taut as a wire. He poured wine, though it was early, then offered me the glass. His hand brushed mine when I took it. Heat rippled through me, uninvited, infuriating. I forced a smile. "So this is my cage. At least it comes with fine dining." His mouth curved slightly. "A cage is only a cage if you want to leave." I met his gaze head on. "And what if I learn to like the view?" The words left my mouth like smoke, dangerous and deliberate. His eyes darkened, the kind of look that made my breath stutter. I saw it then, how my defiance twisted into his desire, how every refusal pulled him closer instead of pushing him away. Maybe I couldn't fight him with fists, but I could fight him with something sharper. "Tell me, Lorenzo," I said softly, tilting my head. "Do you enjoy keeping me locked away because it makes you powerful? Or because it makes you afraid?" His jaw tensed. Just for a moment, a crack in the armor. Afraid. I leaned forward, letting the silk slip against my skin. Knowing his eyes followed the movement. "You keep saying I'm yours, but if you have to chain me to prove it, maybe I never was." The air between us burned. He didn't move, didn't speak, but I felt the weight of his gaze like hands on my skin. For a second, the silence was unbearable. Then, slowly, he leaned back, control settling over him again like a cloak. "Careful, Bella," he murmured. "You're playing a game you don't understand." I smiled, though my heart pounded so hard it hurt. Maybe I do. For the rest of the meal, we barely touched the food. It wasn't about eating. It was about circling, striking, retreating, about proving neither of us would yield. When I returned to my room, my pulse still racing, I realized something terrifying. I had seen it in his eyes. For the first time, Lorenzo wasn't in control. And if I could unravel him, maybe I could survive. Maybe I could even win.
She thought she was clever. The dress. The smile that wasn't a smile. The questions sharpened like knives. I should have been angry. I should have snapped the stem of the wineglass and reminded her how easily beauty bleeds. But instead, I wanted more. I replayed her words long after she left the dining room, pacing the study while the house ticked around me. "Do you enjoy keeping me locked away because it makes you powerful? Or because it makes you afraid?" The truth was both, though I'd never admit it aloud. Afraid. Yes. Afraid of her power, afraid of the way one look from her could dismantle years of iron discipline. I poured whiskey, but it tasted like water. My reflection in the glass mocked me. Suit immaculate, face composed. But inside, a storm. When night fell, I went to her. The guards stiffened, then melted back as I approached. I didn't knock. The lock turned under my hand, the door opening into shadows. She was by the window again, moonlight painting her hair silver, silk clinging like it had been designed for this exact cruelty. She turned, slow, deliberate, as if she'd been waiting. "Can't sleep?" Voice edged with mockery. I closed the door behind me. "Neither can you." Her lips curved. "Maybe I'm dreaming already. Maybe you're not really here." I stepped closer, slow, measured, every heartbeat louder than the last. "If this is a dream, Bella, it's mine, not yours." Her chin lifted, eyes burning. "You want me to be afraid of you?" "No." I stopped just in front of her, close enough that her scent, salt, silk, defiance, wrapped around me like smoke. "I want you to see me, all of me, not the crown, not the cage." Her breath caught. Just for a moment, I reached up, my hand hovering inches from her face. I didn't touch. Not yet. My restraint was its own form of violence. "You think you're winning this game," I whispered, "but every move you make only binds you closer." Her eyes didn't flinch. "Brave girl. Always brave. Maybe that's what scares you." "Scares me." The words sliced deeper than any knife. I lowered my hand slowly, forcing myself back into control before the fire burned through both of us. "Careful, Bella. Keep provoking me, and one day I won't stop myself." Her pulse leapt at her throat, betraying her, but her voice came steady. Maybe that's what I want. The silence between us exploded into heat. My body ached to claim, to crush, to drown us both in the fire she'd ignited. But I didn't move, because if I touched her now, it wouldn't be possession. It would be surrender. And surrender is a language I don't yet speak. I stepped back, each inch a blade. Sleep, I ordered, though the word rasped like a lie. I left before the cage cracked open completely. The lock clicked behind me, sealing both of us into prisons we didn't understand. But one truth lingered like smoke in my lungs. I was no longer hunting her. I was already caught.
The invitation came like an order. Dinner, 8 o'clock, the Red Room. I wanted to refuse, to starve in defiance, to let silence be my answer. But some instincts are stronger than pride. Hunger sharpens, loneliness corrodes. And beneath it all, a twisted curiosity gnawed at me. What would happen if I sat across from him without walls, without guards, only fire between us? The Red Room lived up to its name. Velvet curtains spilled from ceiling to floor. Candles flickered in tall golden holders, their flames licking shadows into shapes. The table stretched long and dark, but the food was arranged only for two, silver covers gleaming, wine breathing in crystal. He was already there, of course. Lorenzo rose when I entered, black suit unbuttoned, his posture too controlled to be casual. His eyes swept over me, deliberate, lingering. I'd chosen a simple dress, cream-colored, modest compared to the silk he seemed to prefer on me. But the way he looked at me, as if the fabric was already smoke, made my skin flush against my will. "Sit," he said. Not a request. I did. For a while, there was only the soft clink of silver. I didn't trust the food, but hunger betrayed me. I tasted it, and it was exquisite. He watched me lift every bite, as if memorizing the movement of my mouth. Finally, I broke the silence. Why the performance? The candles? The wine? You want me to believe this is a courtship? His lips curved. No. Courtship asks permission. I don't. The arrogance lit something sharp in my chest. Then what is this? A lesson, he said simply. My fork paused. In what? His gaze darkened, steady, unblinking. In how hate tastes when you sit too close to it. My pulse stumbled. He leaned back, swirling wine in his glass. You want to kill me, Bella. I see it in the way you grip the fork as if it could be a blade. And yet, he tilted his head, a predator studying prey. You came. You eat. You breathe the same air as me. I met his gaze with fire. I came because you ordered me. Did I? His voice dipped low, almost dangerous. Or did you come because you wanted to see if the fire between us would burn you alive? My throat tightened. His words slid too close to the truth I didn't want to name. I forced a laugh. You think every woman who looks at you wants to burn? No, he said, eyes locked on mine. Only you. The table became unbearable, the space between us charged. I shifted, and his gaze followed the movement of my hands, my throat, every detail. To break the spell, I lifted my glass. If you think I'll ever love you, you're more delusional than I thought. He smiled. Not wounded, not offended, amused. Love? He shook his head. No, I don't want your love. His voice dropped to a whisper that brushed over me like heat. I want your surrender. My breath caught. He leaned closer across the table, candlelight striking his cheekbones, eyes molten with something between fury and desire. And here's the truth, Bella. Every time you defy me, every time you provoke me, you bring yourself closer to it. I should have looked away, should have spat in his face, but instead my body betrayed me. I leaned forward too, drawn by a gravity I despised. Our faces hovered close enough that I could feel the heat of his breath, smell the wine on his lips. For a suspended moment, the mansion, the war, Mateo's ghost, everything dissolved. There was only his gaze, pulling me into a storm I didn't know how to escape. Then I pushed back, scraping the chair loudly against the floor. My chest heaved, anger my only shield. Enjoy your lesson, I snapped, turning toward the door. Bella, his voice stopped me cold, a command without volume. I turned just enough to meet his eyes. You'll keep coming back, he said softly, dangerously certain, because hate is hunger, and hunger always returns to the table. My hand trembled on the doorknob, but I forced myself out, the lock sealing behind me. Alone in the corridor, I pressed a palm to my chest, heart raging against bone. I hated him. I hated myself. And worst of all, I hated how much he was right.
The house woke me with its silence. It was too deep, too unnatural. I had learned long ago that danger doesn't announce itself with noise. It arrives in the quiet, like a predator holding its breath. The first shot cracked the window a second later. Glass shattered, raining across the marble floor of my study. The lamp flickered, and then, Chaos. I was on my feet before the second volley of gunfire ripped through the night. Shouts thundered from the corridor. The scent of gunpowder and roses twisted together, acrid and sickly sweet. They came here. The Brunetti family had been circling like vultures for months. Tonight, they decided to test whether the king's palace could bleed. I grabbed the pistol from my desk drawer, chambered around, and pushed into the hall. My men were already firing back, shadows moving fast, voices clipped with adrenaline. The sound was deafening, ricochets biting into the walls, and above it all, her scream. Bella. I ran. The West Wing was under fire. I counted bodies as I passed, blood blooming on tile, men groaning, the air sharp with iron. Smoke crawled along the ceiling, searching for throats. Her door was open. I froze for a heartbeat at the sight. Bella pressed against the wall, hair wild, nightdress torn at the hem. Two men dragged her by the arms, rifles slung, and faces twisted with greed. Rival soldier. My blood turned to ice. One lifted his hand to strike her when she fought too hard. I fired. He dropped instantly, skull painting the doorway red. The second swung his weapon toward me, but I was faster. Another shot. Clean. Center mass. He collapsed at her feet. She gasped, eyes wide, chest heaving. For once, she didn't look at me with hate. She looked at me like I was the only solid thing left in the storm. "Stay down," I barked, moving to shield her as another burst of gunfire tore into the corridor. Bullets screamed past, shards of wood exploding around us. I wrapped my body around hers, forcing her into the corner, the heat of her fear pressing against me. "Don't move," I growled. Her hands clutched my jacket, nails digging into my back, not out of defiance, but survival. My men stormed in, returning fire, shouts colliding with the thunder of guns. The house shook with war. I leaned out, fired 2 more rounds, then ducked back, pain blooming in my shoulder. I'd been hit. Bella's gasp cut sharper than the bullet. "Lorenzo!" Quiet. My teeth clenched against the sting, but I forced myself steady. I couldn't bleed in front of her. Not now. Kings don't falter. But her hands trembled against my wound, warm and desperate, and something in me cracked. The fight raged for what felt like an eternity, until at last the gunfire ebbed. Silence returned, this time heavy with smoke and death. My men shouted confirmation. "Clear!" I exhaled hard, the ache in my shoulder searing. I tried to stand straight, but her arms steadied me before I could brush her away. Her eyes searched mine, angry, terrified, burning. "Why?" she whispered, voice shaking. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" The answer rose unbidden, sharp as truth. "Because you're the only thing in this house worth bleeding for." But I didn't speak it. I couldn't. Instead, I pressed the pistol into my holster, blood seeping through my shirt, and forced a grim smile. "Because you're mine." Her lips parted, trembling with fury, with something else I didn't dare name. Before she could answer, my men dragged the bodies from the hall. Orders barked, reinforcements posted. The war wasn't over. It had only started. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Only her hands on me, only the fire in her eyes, only the truth I refused to speak, that tonight, she had seen me bleed, and I wasn't sure I'd ever recover.
Blood stained the marble like a signature no one could erase. They dragged the corpses away, voices clipped, boots echoing down corridors that suddenly felt too narrow. Smoke still clung to the air, a ghost of gunfire, sharp in my lungs, but all I could see was the crimson soaking through his shirt, the way he pressed his jaw tight as if pain was beneath him. Lorenzo. He staggered when the others weren't looking. Not much. Just enough for me to catch the truth. He was breaking, bleeding, human. "Bring him to the East Chamber," one of his men barked, reaching for his arm. "No," I said before I thought better of it. My voice was steel over the tremor in my chest. "He comes with me." The soldier hesitated, confusion flickering across his face. Lorenzo's gaze found mine, dark, fevered, unreadable. Then, with the smallest tilt of his head, he dismissed his men, and just like that, he was mine to carry. The room was quiet, lit only by the glow of a single lamp. I guided him to the bed, his weight heavy against me, though he tried to hide it. His hand gripped the frame until his knuckles turned white. I pulled the ruined jacket from his shoulders, my fingers brushing fabric slick with blood. "Sit," I whispered. He obeyed. I tore strips from the sheets, luxury reduced to bandages, and pressed them to his wound. He didn't flinch. His eyes stayed on me, unblinking, as if I were the one unraveling, not him. "You should call a doctor," I muttered, pressing harder. The blood welled hot against my palms. "Or are kings too proud to bleed properly?" His lips curved faintly, even through pain. "I told you. Cages protect, even from bullets." Anger surged. "Is that what I am? Your bird in a cage? Something to bleed for your amusement?" He caught my wrist suddenly, grip firm but not cruel. His skin burned under mine, heat radiating like fever. You think this is amusement? His voice was hoarse, raw. I would have let the house fall before I let them take you. My breath caught. The words weren't sweet. They weren't gentle. They were a confession wrapped in steel, and I hated how they struck me, how they cracked something inside that had been solid with rage. I pulled my wrist free, focusing on the wound. He watched me tear away his shirt, buttons snapping, fabric falling open to reveal a chest carved with old scars, bullet lines, knife trails, his history written in skin. You've been hurt before, I whispered, tracing the marks with my eyes. Many times, and yet you still stand. He leaned closer, breath hot against my cheek. So do you. The room shrank. My pulse hammered in my throat. His eyes burned into me, daring me to deny what was building between us. My hands trembled, not from fear but from the fire curling low in my belly, the betrayal of my own body. I pressed the bandage tighter, forcing space between us. Don't mistake this for care, I said, my voice barely steady. I'm not your nurse. I'm not your wife. No, he murmured, lips near my ear. But you're mine. I froze. His voice was too close, too deep. My skin burned where his breath brushed it. For a moment, the air between us was unbearable, the silence heavier than gunfire. Then I shoved him back, more for myself than for him. Rest! I snapped, standing too fast. My legs felt unsteady, traitorous. You need strength for your next war. I turned away before he could see the confusion in my eyes, the tremor in my hands. Behind me, he chuckled low, dark and exhausted. You think I need strength to fight them, he said softly. But the truth, Bella, I need strength to keep from devouring you. My breath faltered. I left the room before the words could finish sinking their teeth into me.
The house reeked of smoke and blood, but in the east chamber it was quiet. Too quiet. I lay against the pillows, shirt torn open, bandage already stained through. Pain gnawed at my shoulder like an old dog, but I welcomed it. Pain has always been cleaner than silence. I should have slept. I should have called a doctor, but all I could think of was her hands, small, trembling, pressing against my wound, as if she hated me enough to keep me alive. Bella. Her name turned in me like a blade. I poured whiskey with my good hand, watching amber bleed across the glass. The first swallow burned my throat, but not enough to drown the memory of her touch. The way she looked at me, not just with hate, with something she refused to name. I laughed once, harsh, bitter. My father would have struck me for weakness like this. A king does not bleed for a woman, he used to snarl. But he bled for all of them, a bullet in the throat. His empire half swallowed by rivals. Power devours, no matter how strong the hand that holds it. I closed my eyes and saw her, not as she is now, but as she was the first time they put her in my arm. A bundle of lace, barely breathing, while the men around us toasted to futures sealed. Promessa, they said, a promise carved into bone before she could eat. I looked at her and felt a weight I couldn't bear, so I said no. Cruel, heartless, maybe I was, but I was also afraid. Afraid of breaking something I didn't yet understand, afraid of what would happen if I let her matter. Now, decades later, I was still afraid. The door creaked. I turned my head, breath sharp with the instinct to draw a weapon, but it was only her. Bella slipped inside like a shadow, cautious, uncertain. She must have thought I was asleep, because she froze when she saw my eyes open. You shouldn't be here, I said, my voice rough with whiskey and exhaustion. She hesitated, then stepped closer. You're bleeding through the bandage. Her defiance cut deeper than the wound. Even now, even after everything, she would risk standing in the lion's den to tell me I was human. I smirked faintly. And you came to save me? Her lips pressed thin. I came to make sure you don't die and leave me trapped here with your men, liar. But a beautiful. She crossed the room, picking up the cloth on the nightstand. Her fingers brushed my skin again, rewrapping the bandage with clumsy determination. I watched her hand, memorizing the way they shook, the way they steadied when she forced them to. You've done this before, I murmured. She shot me a glance. Matteo cut himself once working on an engine. I helped him. The name was a knife, but I swallowed it. And you helped me the same way? Her jaw tightened. No, you're nothing like him. I chuckled low. Good. She glared at me, fire in her eyes, but didn't pull her hands away. For a long moment, silence stretched between us. Only the sound of her breath, the heat of her body leaning close to mine. My mask slipped, just a crack, enough for the truth to bleed out. My father used to tell me I was born to rule, I said softly, but I think I was only born to be empty. Her hands stilled. Her eyes flicked to mine, startled. I shouldn't have said it. I shouldn't have let the words escape. But the whiskey loosened more than blood tonight. Every scar, I continued, nodding to the lines across my chest, was earned in silence. No one touched them. No one cared. Until you. Her breath caught. She shook her head, as if refusing to hear. Don't twist this. I don't care. I'm only keeping you alive because I want to be free. Maybe, I whispered, or maybe you keep me alive because some part of you, without me, you'd be lost. Her eyes flashed, fury and confusion warring in their depths. She stood abruptly, cloth falling from her hands. Rest, she snapped, turning toward the door. But her steps faltered, just for an instant, before she left. And I lay there in the dark, pain searing through me, whiskey burning in my throat, and realized the truth I had never dared admit. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of living without her.
Sleep mocked me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Matteo, his hands reaching for me, his mouth forming promises that the world had stolen. And then, just as quickly, I saw him fall, blood soaking the ground while my scream cracked the sky. But tonight, another image intruded. Lorenzo. The way his breath caught when the pain cut deeper than his pride. The low rasp of his voice when he admitted emptiness, scars, truths he should have buried with his enemies. I should have despised him more for it. Instead, the memory clung to me like smoke, refusing to leave. I pressed my palms over my face, desperate to smother the confusion. Matteo was my heart, my future, my freedom. But Matteo was gone, buried in a grave I could never visit. And Lorenzo. Lorenzo was flesh and fire, a storm that refused to let me go. The next morning, I found myself standing outside the east chamber before I could stop. The guard stepped aside without question. His orders, no doubt. The door opened, and there he was, half-dressed, his bandage stark against tanned skin, scars like roads leading to places I didn't want to imagine. He looked up. His gaze burned, even through exhaustion. Couldn't stay away? I clenched my fists. Don't flatter yourself. I just wanted to make sure you weren't dead. He chuckled, the sound rough, dangerous. Disappointed? I ignored the sting and crossed the room, grabbing the cloth and the basin of water. My hands moved automatically, unwrapping the bandage, cleaning the wound. His eyes never left my face. You should stop staring, I muttered. I can't. The words froze me. Simple, raw, not cloaked in arrogance this time. I looked up and the silence between us thickened, too heavy to hold. I wanted to hate him. God, I wanted to. But my hands trembled as I touched his skin, the heat of him sinking into my palms. His scars whispered of battles fought in shadows, of a man forged in violence and solitude. He was cruel, merciless, dangerous, yet sitting here, bleeding and unmasked, he was something else too. Human. Why me? The question slipped out before I could bite it back. My voice was barely a whisper. You could have anyone. Why chain yourself to me? His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, his hand rose and covered mine where it pressed against his chest. His skin was fever-hot, his pulse steady and strong under my palm. Because, he said quietly, you make me feel alive, and I don't remember the last time I did. My breath faltered. For one heartbeat, I let it happen. I let myself feel the weight of his words, the heat of his body, the way his eyes searched mine like I was the only truth he had left. Desire curled low in my stomach, traitorous and undeniable. Then guilt struck like a blade. Matteo. Sweet Matteo, with his hands stained by oil and hope. How dare I let another man's touch stir me when his blood still screamed in my memory? I pulled back abruptly, water sloshing in the basin. My heart thundered, shame and fury warring inside me. Don't, I whispered, voice shaking. Don't you dare make me forget him. Lorenzo's eyes darkened. I don't want you to forget. I want you to remember. Remember him. Remember the pain. Remember everything. And then choose me anyway. The audacity of it left me breathless. My hands curled into fists at my sides, nails biting into my palms. I will never choose you, I said, though the tremor in my voice betrayed me. His mouth curved, not in victory, but in something darker. We'll see. I turned and fled the room before my knees betrayed me. In the corridor, I pressed my back against the wall, my chest heaving, my skin burning from where he had touched me. I hated him. I missed Matteo. And worse, I wanted Lorenzo. The truth was tearing me apart.
Jealousy is not an emotion. It is a weapon. And tonight, it was lodged in my ribs. I had heard her whisper his name, not to me, not even to anyone alive. She had been in the garden, thinking herself hidden by roses and shadows. The guards reported nothing unusual because they didn't understand what I heard. I was close enough to catch it, the words slipping from her lips like a ghost she didn't know was still haunting her. Matteo. The sound burned worse than bullets. I had bled for her. I had killed for her. I had built a cage gilded enough to make her despise me, and still she thought of him. The boy with grease under his nails, whose hands would never be strong enough to hold her. The boy I should have ended properly. I poured whiskey, then hurled the glass against the fireplace. It shattered, firelight catching the shards like stars. My men outside the door stiffened but didn't enter. They knew better. I found myself pacing, back and forth, like a beast too large for its own cage. The house was mine, the city was mine, but her heart, untamed, still whispering to the dead. When I finally entered her chamber, the air between us shifted instantly. She sat near the window, the night pressing pale light across her face. She stiffened at the sight of me, but her chin lifted, defiant, always defiant. "Did you call his name for him to come back?" I asked, voice low, dangerous. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "You were listening. I hear everything." She stood, fists clenched. "And if I did? What does it matter to you? You killed him. You stole every choice from me. You think I won't remember?" Her words struck like blades, but I didn't flinch. I stepped closer, the heat of fury simmering in my chest. "You will remember, but you will not worship his ghost in my house." She trembled, not with fear, but with rage. "You can lock my body, Lorenzo. You can't lock my mind." I was too close now, my shadow swallowing hers against the wall. My hand lifted before I could stop it, fingers curling around her jaw, not cruel, but firm enough to hold her still. Her breath hitched, chest rising fast against mine. "You think of him," I murmured, eyes burning into hers. "But when your hands touched me last night, when your breath faltered, did you think of him then?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her pulse thundered against my thumb. "Tell me," I demanded, voice rough, aching. "When you pressed cloth to my skin, when you saw me bleed, did you imagine him in my place?" Tears welled, fury glittering in. "I hate you," she whispered. The words sliced me open, but beneath them I heard something else. "Not Matteo. Me." I lowered my head, my lips a breath from. "Good. Hate me. Hate me so much you can't sleep without tasting it. But don't lie to me, Bella. Your hate belongs to me, not to him." Her body trembled against mine, fire and storm in one fragile frame. I could have kissed her. God, I wanted to. But instead, I forced myself back, releasing her jaw with a sharp motion. I turned away, my hands fists at my sides, the taste of restraint bitter in my mouth. "Don't speak his name again," I said, voice steady though my chest was chaos. "Not in this house, not where I can hear it." And before the cage cracked any further, I left. But even as the door locked behind me, I knew the truth. Matteo was dead, and still, somehow, I was losing to his ghost.
I couldn't breathe in this house. Every corridor smelled of him. Cologne, smoke, iron. Every lock reminded me of his voice, low and unyielding. And now his demand burned in my skull. Don't speak his name again. Matteo's name. The rage boiled over. I didn't care if he heard me. I wanted him to hear. I wanted to wound him the way he wounded me. So when the guards left me alone after dinner, I stormed straight to his study. The door wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. He was waiting. Lorenzo sat behind a heavy desk, shadows clinging to him like a second suit, a glass of whiskey in his hand, untouched. When his eyes lifted to mine, the room shrank. "Bella," my name on his lips was a verdict. "You don't get to silence me," I snapped. My chest rose and fell too fast, voice shaking with fury. "You killed him. You killed Matteo, and now you dare tell me not to remember? You don't own my mind." His jaw flexed, the muscle jumping beneath his skin. He rose slowly, each movement deliberate, as though he controlled not just the room, but time itself. "Say it again," he murmured. I blinked. "What?" "His name. Say it." He stepped around the desk, every stride eating the space between us. "Spit it like a blade. Wound me with it." I should have felt fear. Instead, I felt my pulse leap wild and hot. "Matteo," I hissed, daring him. "Matteo, Matteo." He was on me in an instant, his hand slamming against the wall beside my head, his body caging mine. His breath scorched my cheek, his eyes burning with fire and storm. "Enough. No." My hands balled into fists, pressed against his chest. "You'll never erase him." He leaned closer, so close our lips nearly brushed. "I don't want to erase him," he growled. "I want to replace him." My breath caught. The world tilted, rage colliding with desire so fierce I nearly staggered. My fist shoved harder against his chest, but instead of pushing him away, I felt myself pulling him closer. His heart thundered beneath my palms, as wild as mine. "Tell me you don't want this," he demanded, his voice raw. "Look me in the eye and swear it." I couldn't. God help me, I couldn't. My mouth parted, but no words came. Only silence thick with betrayal. Of Matteo. Of myself. His eyes darkened. Exactly. And then, his mouth crashed against mine. It wasn't a kiss. It was a battle. Teeth, breath, fury. My hands clawed at his shirt, tearing, resisting, yielding all at once. His fingers tangled in my hair, holding me where he wanted me, but I fought him, bit him, forced him to fight harder. The room spun, the world collapsed into fire and shadow. Hate tasted like whiskey, like blood, like heat too sharp to bear. I should have pulled away. I should have screamed. Instead, I opened, devouring him with the same hunger he poured into me. Our rage fed our desire, and in that moment, they were indistinguishable. When he finally tore his mouth from mine, both of us were breathing ragged, foreheads pressed together as if holding each other up. His hand still cradled my face, mine still clutched his chest. "You see?" he rasped. "This is what you're running from. Not Mateo, not freedom. This." Tears pricked my eyes, furious, shameful. "I hate you," I whispered, voice breaking. His lips brushed my cheek, my jaw, stopping just short of surrender. "Then hate me harder," he said. And for the first time, I realized hate might not be enough to protect me anymore.
The taste of her lingered. Salt, defiance, fire. Bella thought our kiss had been a battle. She was wrong. It was a declaration. For hours afterward, I sat alone in my study, palms braced against the desk, chest heaving as if I'd just come from war. In a way, I had. Not against her, but against myself, against the fragile piece of me that still whispered about control, patience, restraint. That piece was dead now. She was mine, not because of vows written before she could walk, not because of chains, guards, or locked doors. She was mine because when I touched her, she burned, and no woman burns like that for a ghost. Still, Mateo's shadow stalked me. I saw it in the flicker of her eyes when his name slipped past her lips. I felt it in the way her fists clenched even as her mouth devoured mine. That boy still lived in her somehow, haunting me through her skin. It enraged me. I poured whiskey, but the glass cracked in my grip, shards biting in my palm. Blood ran down my wrist, dripping onto papers filled with accounts, war strategies, territories that stretched across oceans. None of it mattered. I would set it all on fire if it meant erasing Mateo from her veins. And yet, I didn't want to erase him. I wanted her to choose me despite him. I wanted her to look at the memory of that boy and still reach for me with trembling hands. I wanted victory so complete would echo in her bones. The door creaked. She stood in the threshold, hair loose, face pale in the lamplight. Her eyes met mine, unflinching despite the storm she had walked into. Brave as always, reckless as always. "You're bleeding," she said softly, gaze flicking to my hand. "I don't feel it." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You should." For a moment, silent. The air between us pulsed with what had happened hours. Her mouth still swollen, my jaw still aching from the scrape of her teeth. Our hate still smoldering, unable to disguise itself as anything else. She stepped closer. "You think this will last? That locking me here, making me kiss you, forcing me to burn like this?" Her voice shook, but she forced it steady. "You think it makes me yours?" I rose, closing the distance between us in 2 strides. My good hand caught her chin, tilting her face up until her eyes were trapped in mine. "No," I murmured, voice low, lethal. "It doesn't make you mine. It proves you already were." Her breath hitched, fury, and something darker flashing in her gaze. She pushed at my chest, weak compared to the force of my grip. Still, I let her shove, let her feel the illusion of defiance. "You'll hate me for it," I said, leaning closer, lips brushing her temple. "But I'll burn the world to keep you. If my enemies come, I'll slaughter them all. If you run, I'll chain the oceans until there's nowhere left to hide." Her hands trembled against me, not from fear, from rage, or desire. With her, I could never tell the difference. "You're insane," she whispered. "Completely," I said. My mouth found the edge of her jaw, heat sinking into her skin. "And now you're insane with me." She tore free suddenly, stumbling back toward the door, breath ragged. Her eyes shone, hate, shame, confusion, all tangled together. "I will never love you," she spat. I smiled, slow, merciless. "I don't need your love, Bella. I need your fire, and you've already given it to me." She fled, the door slamming behind her. I stood in the silence, blood dripping from my palm, heart hammering like a drum of war. She thought she had escaped me, but every tremor in her voice, every flush of her skin, every denial screamed the truth louder than she ever would. Bella was already mine. The world could burn, and I would watch it burn with her at my side.
The night split open with sirens. Alarms screamed through the mansion like the voice of God himself. And then the thunder came, gunfire outside the walls, closer than before, rattling the windows, shaking the chandeliers. Shouts echoed down the corridors, boots pounding marble. I bolted upright from bed, heart slamming against my ribs. The air reeked of smoke and gunpowder again, but this time sharper, thicker, closer. The war had found us. I snatched the robe from the chair, pulling it around me, and crept toward the door. Guards were shouting orders, rifles cocking, radios crackling, and then an explosion. The entire wing shuddered, plaster dust raining from the ceiling. For the first time since Lorenzo had locked me here, a thought struck me like lightning. This is my chance. I pressed myself into the corridor as chaos erupted. Men ran toward the east gate, away from me. Flames licked the horizon through the tall windows, painting the garden in orange. The gates, open or broken. The path to the street was no longer impossible. My pulse soared. I slipped into the shadows, moving barefoot across marble cold enough to bite. The chaos covered me. No one noticed. I reached the end of the corridor, then the stairs. The smell of roses drowned now by the stench of burning fuel. Outside, freedom was close enough to taste. I reached the garden. Smoke curled around the roses, the hedge walls torn open by a blast. Beyond them, streets, darkness, anonymity. For the first time since Matteo's death, I could choose my own step, my own breath. Run. I tightened the robe around me and sprinted across the grass, lungs burning. My heart screamed Matteo's name, screamed for freedom, for air without chains, for the life that had been stolen. And then, behind me, a voice. Bella. It wasn't a shout. It was a roar. I froze. Through the smoke and fire, I saw him, Lorenzo. Blood at his temple, jacket torn, pistol in one hand. His men scattered around him, firing into the night. But his eyes were only on me. Our gazes locked. Go, whispered something in me. Matteo's ghost urging me forward. The gate was open. I could vanish. But my legs refused to move, because the look in his eyes wasn't command. It wasn't threat. It was something else. Raw, desperate. He was bleeding, barely standing, fighting not just enemies, but gravity itself. And still, he was looking at me. Inside, one of his men shouted, grabbing his arm. He shook him off, staggering toward me through smoke and fire. Stay where you are, he barked, voice breaking. I trembled, every instinct divided. Run to freedom, or stay with the devil who had caged me, bled for me, kissed me until my soul shook. The gunfire drew closer. The night howled. My heart split in two. And still, I didn't move. I hated him. God, I hated him. But when his knees nearly buckled, when blood smeared across his cheek, the thought of leaving him there, alone, broken, dying, felt like stepping into a grave myself. Tears blurred my vision. My feet dragged me back. Not forward, not to freedom. Back, toward him, toward the man who had destroyed me, toward the man I couldn't let go. The roar of the battle swallowed everything, but inside the fire of my chest, I already knew the truth. The cage wasn't holding me anymore. I was choosing it.
The night was fire. Explosions chewed through the gardens. Rifles spat sparks against marble, and the air reeked of smoke and blood. My men were falling one by one, but I kept moving, dragging my body forward through pain that felt like claws sinking deep into my chest. And then, I saw her, Bella, framed in the smoke, hair loose, robe clinging to her frame. For a heartbeat, the battle around us ceased to matter. She could have run. She should have. The gate yawned open behind her like a promise. But her eyes, those ash-gray eyes, were on me, and her feet moved toward me, not away. Something inside me broke. Get her inside, I barked, raising my gun, firing into the shadows of men who dared breach my walls. Another shot answered, grazing my ribs. Pain flared hot, but I kept firing, kept standing. Bella reached me just as another explosion rocked the ground, throwing us both against the stone wall of the courtyard. Her hands grabbed my arm, steadying me, her face pale with terror. "You're bleeding!" she choked. "I'll bleed later," I growled, shoving her behind me as another wave of enemies surged through the smoke. I shot two before my magazine clicked empty. A blade flashed, a man lunged. I met him with my fists, the impact searing my injured shoulder. He hit the ground, and another took his place. The world shrank to violence, to survival, to her scream when one of them nearly reached her. I tore him down before he could touch her, my knuckles splitting open, rage blackening the edges of my vision. When the last of them scattered, silence fell heavy, broken only by the crackle of flames. I sagged against the wall, chest heaving, blood soaking through my shirt. My body screamed for rest. But she was there, clutching me, shaking her head as if refusal could keep me upright. "Don't you dare die," she whispered, voice ragged. "Don't you leave me like this." I looked at her then, really. Her eyes weren't on the gate. They weren't on freedom. They were on me. The truth clawed its way out before I could stop it. Bella, I rasped. Matteo, he isn't dead. She froze, breath ripping from her lungs. What? I forced a bloody phone from my pocket, thumb trembling as I swiped the screen. A video played, grainy footage of a man in a workshop, hands blackened with grease, face older but unmistakable. Matteo, alive, breathing, working somewhere far away, China, where no one could touch him. Bella's gasp broke me. I staged it, I admitted, voice raw. The blood, the body, the van. I sent him away, far enough that the war would never find him. I couldn't risk him pulling you from me. I needed to know. My throat clenched, the words scraping like glass. I needed to know if without him, you would still burn for me. Her hands trembled against me, her lips parted, but no sound came. Tears welled, falling fast, carving salt across her cheeks. You bastard, she whispered, voice cracking. You let me think he was gone. You made me mourn him. Yes. My eyes locked on her, unflinching even as the weight of my confession crushed me. Because if there was even one piece of your heart left with him, I had to see it die before you gave the rest to me. The silence between us was unbearable. She shook, rage and grief colliding, but she didn't let go of me. Her hands stayed on my chest, pressing hard against the blood, as if keeping me tethered even through hate. And then she whispered the words I had been starving for, trembling, furious, undeniable. I hate you so much, but God help me, I can't let you go. I closed my eyes, a broken laugh tearing from my chest. That's enough. Around us the mansion burned. My men shouted orders, dragging bodies, patching wounds. But in that moment, all I saw was her. All I felt was her fire. I leaned close, my breath shuddering against her ear. Now you know the truth, Bella. Matteo lives. But you, my voice cracked, fierce and certain. You live for me.
The mansion still smelled of smoke. Days had passed since the battle, but the air carried the ghost of fire and blood. Men limped through the halls, bandages stark against black suits. Windows had been replaced, walls scrubbed, but nothing could wash away the memory of that night. Not from them, not from me. Lorenzo lay in the east chamber, pale but alive, his wound stitched, his body bound in silence. I should have left him there to rot. I should have let him bleed the way he let me bleed for Matteo. But I stayed. I bathed the wound, changed the bandages, fed him broth when his hands shook. Each time I told myself it wasn't care, it was necessity. If he died, I'd be trapped here with his men, his empire, his crown of iron. And yet, when his eyes opened, when they searched for me as if I were the only anchor he had left, my chest betrayed me. I hated him for what he had done, for Matteo, for the lies, for the cage he'd built around my life. But hate wasn't enough anymore. Not when I remembered the way he stood in fire, bleeding, still shielding me with his body. Not when I remembered the raw truth in his voice as he admitted Matteo still lived. Matteo. The video haunted me, his hands blackened with grease, his face older, harder, alive. Somewhere far away, he breathed under another sky. I should have felt joy. I should have begged to be sent to him. But when I closed my eyes, it wasn't Matteo I saw. It was Lorenzo, his mouth on mine, brutal and desperate. His eyes when he thought he might lose me. His voice, "You live for me." I pressed a cloth against his wound, and he winced, his breath catching. Our eyes met. He didn't speak. He didn't need to, because the truth was already devouring me. I had the chance to run. I could still run. Matteo was alive. Freedom was possible. But my heart no longer ached for escape. It ached for the devil bleeding in front of me. And as I leaned closer, brushing hair from his damp forehead, I whispered the only confession I could give without destroying myself completely. I should hate you forever, Lorenzo. But I can't. His lips curved faintly, even in pain. He caught my wrist with trembling fingers, weak but unyielding. And for the first time, I didn't pull away. The world outside still burned with war, but inside this room, I knew my choice. Not freedom, not Matteo. Him, always him.
The mansion was quiet again, too quiet. The kind of silence that follows fire and blood, when even the walls remember the screams. I sat on the balcony of the east chamber, bandages tight around my chest, a glass of whiskey untouched beside me. Palermo stretched beyond the gates, bruised but breathing. My empire still stood. My enemies had retreated into the shadows to lick their wounds. And she was here. Bella. I heard her footsteps in the corridor before she appeared. Not the hurried, frantic steps of a captive trying to escape. Slower now, reluctant, but present. She came because she wanted to, even if she hadn't admitted it. When her figure filled the doorway, pale in the dying light, my chest tightened in a way I didn't recognize. Not weakness, not victory, something more dangerous. You should be resting, she said softly, her voice cautious. I smirked faintly. Kings don't rest. They wait. She crossed the room, her hands clasped in front of her as if she feared what they might do if they were free. Her eyes searched me, still wary, still angry, but beneath it, something else flickered, something I had fought, killed, and bled for. Mine. Why did you tell me, she asked suddenly, about Mateo? The name was a shard between us, but I didn't flinch. I held her gaze, because I had to be certain. I needed to see if your fire would survive without him. Her lips trembled. And if it hadn't? Then I would have kept burning until it did. She shook her head, tears threatening, but she didn't leave. She stood in front of me breathing the same air, and that was enough. I leaned forward, ignoring the ache in my ribs, and caught her wrist. Her skin was warm, alive. She froze, but didn't pull away. Listen to me, Bella, I said, my voice low, a vow carved into the smoke-filled air. The world will keep coming for me, for us. They'll try to tear us apart, to use you against me, but they'll fail, because you're not just mine by blood, or by promise, or by cage. You're mine because you chose to stay. Her eyes burned but her silence betrayed. I tugged her closer until she stood between my knees, her hands trembling against my chest. Her pulse thundered under my touch, not from fear, no, not anymore, but from the same fire that consumed me from the moment I saw her run and walk. You live for me now, I whispered against her skin, and I'll kill anyone who tries to steal a single breath of you. Her tears slipped free then, but she didn't move. She let me hold her. She let me claim her. Outside, Palermo burned with its wars. But inside these walls, I had already won the only war that mattered, and I would never lose her. Not to ghosts, not to fate, not to anyone.
Immense gratitude for making it this far, and thank you for listening to our story. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to share it on your social networks to help our channel grow and spread more of our stories. I kindly ask you to like this video and leave a comment. Your feedback truly helps me keep writing and creating new stories with passion. And if you are not yet subscribed, please do so. It may seem simple, but it makes a huge difference for me and for the future of this work. Once again, my deepest gratitude and all my love to you.